You can't do that. You have to be ethical in all ways, even with Donald Trump, and you have to make sure that you give fair and impartial journalism. And the BBC seems, in this case, to have made a mistake.
The BBC chairman is expected to offer an apology after Donald Trump accused the broadcaster of 100% fake news after a Panorama documentary doctored clips of the US president's speech on January the 6th. The corporation has said that it unintentionally misled viewers by splicing together two parts of the same speech that Trump gave on January the 6th, 2021, before his supporters stormed the Capitol. We have on the line Roger Mosey, the former director of BBC TV News. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio, Roger. What do you make of the expected apology? I mean, do you think it is necessary?
Well, I think the BBC had this big document produced by someone who had been an editorial advisor, Michael Prescott, and it ran to 19 pages. And I think some of it is right and some of it is wrong. And I'm sure the BBC both factored in what he'd said and at times thought he was probably being a bit irritating. Unfortunately for the BBC, the accusation about editing the Trump Panorama seems to be absolutely justified, and that the BBC edited the programme in a way that it shouldn't have been, that it cut Donald Trump's speech in a way that was misleading. So therefore they are bound to apologise, and they got this one wrong. And I don't know whether the story is absolutely confirmed yet they're going to apologise, but everyone I talked to in the BBC thinks that they should.
Yes, I mean, interesting, Roger Bolton was on Times Radio earlier this morning, and he was pointing out that, yes, of course, it was naughty editing, but in the grand scheme of things, it was showing a true picture of Donald Trump on January the 6th in a broad brush way, and this was a documentary many years after the event. It kind of got the story true, which is that, namely, Donald Trump was denying the election of Joe Biden.
I think that's probably why the BBC didn't respond in the way that Michael Prescott, this editorial advisor, wanted, because he thought that the whole programme was wrong and they should have made an equivalent programme attacking Kamala Harris. Now, I think in impartial journalism, of course, you can call out Donald Trump for what he did on the 6th of January. He did certainly support the idea that people would march on the Capitol. He would say peacefully, but it turned out not to be peacefully. So I think, therefore, the BBC could have made this programme in an impeccable way that would have been impartial, would have shown what Donald Trump is up to. However, what they did instead was use part of a speech in which they put one sentence together with another sentence, which changed its meaning. And you can't do that. You have to be ethical in all ways, even with Donald Trump. And you have to make sure that you give fair and impartial journalism. And the BBC seems, in this case, to have made a mistake.
Kemi Badenoch has said that there should be resignations at the BBC, including Tim Davie, the Director General. I mean, do you think that's true?
I never play that game because I've been in the BBC. I know that the BBC is, in the end, an organisation worth fighting for. In a world of misinformation and disinformation, you need reputable broadcasters, and I absolutely include Times Radio in this, and the BBC and others, to fight against all the nonsense that's around. And you don't always get it right. And I think the key thing for the BBC is transparency and openness. And what's a bit worrying here is it did take them quite a long time to get to this conclusion. And we've had about 6 days in which people who are ideologically opposed to the BBC and want to destroy it have had a field day because the BBC hasn't responded. And now the BBC should, I think, respond to all the 19 pages of Michael Prescott's document, say what they agree with and what they don't, and in some cases, what action they took as a result. Because I hear from insiders they did respond to some of the criticisms and comments he made. Well, tell us, be accountable.
Now, the BBC has also been criticised for censuring on Thursday the newsreader Martine Croxall, who was accused of rolling her eyes after she amended an autocue that referred to pregnant people, and she corrected it to say women. This was back in June. Roger, what's your view of this? Should the BBC have censored her?
Harry, this is where you go into the wonderful world of regulation. And I was always a journalist and I didn't like regulation very much. But here's how it works. First of all, it was wrong for the script to talk about the aged and pregnant people. It really is nonsense. It should have been pregnant women. However, once you then put it on air, it's not really up to a presenter on air to signal they disagree with the script they're reading. And, Martine, I sympathise completely with Martine, but the general rule is you read what's on the auto cue and you stick with what the editor said, and the editor bears responsibility. So I think, in a way, the BBC upheld this on a technical reason, which is that presenters shouldn't change scripts on air and put their own views in, so therefore it wasn't impartial. But big picture, of course, it was terrible timing for the BBC, and it's not a ruling that most people in this country will understand or support.
Thank you very much. That was Roger Mosey, former director of BBC TV News.
Give them a couple of bucks. And some of the people here disagree with me on that, but I just say, look, you got to let people live. And how does that play, though? Okay, number one, it's the right thing to do. But how does that play politically? I think it's the primary reason, one of the primary reasons. The other was just pure cheating. That was the primary, super primary reason. But you can't do that. You got to use your head. As you know, the media has constantly asserted the outrageous lie that there was no evidence of widespread fraud. Do you ever see these people? While there is no evidence of fraud, oh, really? Well, I'm going to read you pages. I hope you don't get bored listening to it. Promise? Don't get bored listening to it. All those hundreds of thousands of people back there. Like a cleansing motion, right? But we don't have that anymore. We don't have a fair media anymore. It's suppression. And you have to be very careful with that. And they've lost all credibility in this country. We will not be intimidated into accepting the hoaxes and the lies that we've been forced to believe. Over the past several weeks, we've amassed overwhelming evidence about a fake election. This is the presidential election. Last night was a little bit better because of the fact that we had a lot of eyes watching one specific state, but they cheated like hell anyway. You have one of the dumbest governors in the United States. And you know, when I endorsed him, I didn't know this guy. At the request of David Perdue, he said, a friend of mine's running for governor. What's his name? And you know the rest. He was in 4th place, 5th place. I don't know. He was doing poorly. I endorsed him. He went like a rocket ship and he won. And then I had to beat Stacey Abrams with this guy, Brian Kemp. I had to beat Stacey Abrams. And I had to beat Oprah. Used to be a friend of mine. You know, I was on her last show, or last week. She picked the 5 outstanding people. I don't think she thinks that anymore. Once I ran for president, I didn't notice there were too many calls coming in from Oprah. Believe it or not, she used to like me, but I was one of the 5 outstanding people. And I had a campaign against Michelle Obama and Barack Hussein Obama, against Stacey. And I had Brian Kemp. He weighs 130 pounds. He said he played offensive line in football. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm still trying to figure that out. Said that the other night. I was an offensive lineman. I'm saying, really? That must have been a very small team. But I look at that and I look at what's happened, and he turned out to be a disaster. This stuff happens. You know, look, I'm not happy with the Supreme Court. They love to rule against me. I picked 3 people. I fought like hell for them. One in particular I fought. They all said, sir, cut him loose. He's killing us. Senators, you know, very loyal senators. They're very loyal people. Sir, cut him loose. He's killing us, sir. Cut him loose, sir. I must have gotten half of the senators. I said, no, I can't do that. It's unfair to him and it's unfair to the family. He didn't do anything wrong. They're made-up stories. They're all made-up stories. He didn't do anything wrong. Cut him loose, sir. I said, no, I won't do that. We got him through.